Hello, team. Goodness me, I'm stressed. Sorry that I'm a little bit late to this. About 6 minutes late. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a geopolitical live update. Lots to talk about with you, but I've just had to go and pick up my kids, and then pizzas have just turned up at the door. No one knows who they are. I'm shouting at my boys. Have you phoned your mum? No one. I think my boys are eating a pizza that's been delivered to us because I haven't ordered it. They haven't ordered it. And unless the mothers ordered them a pizza, which would be really weird at 4:10 in the afternoon. So anyway, stresses 6 minutes later and me shouting at the boys. I'm back in the zone vaguely. Anyway, calm. Right. Hello. Welcome to this video. We are going to be talking quite a bit about oil, quite a bit about energy. I have lots and lots of stuff to go through as ever with you. And I almost have too much to talk about today, but that's nothing unusual. Talking about Doris losing her pizza, maybe doing a patch involving Doris, as I said this morning. So I'm quite excited about that. Where do we start? Let's start with Moldova. I hope you guys are okay in the live chat. Welcome, 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 and all that. Benny Pie is in the background. He's just heard me shouting at my kids, no doubt. So that's fine. Right, Moldova it is, and we're going to go to Maya Sandy. I haven't watched this interview yet, but one of my favorite podcasts is the Rest is Politics podcast with Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, and they've both just been over in Moldova, and they've interviewed Maya Sandu, who is the leader of Moldova. And it's interesting what she was saying about the interference from Russia. And we're going to go here to see, well, I could play it to you, but I'll say what her answer was. So the Moldovan president, Maya Sandu, has said that she would support unification with Romania if a referendum were held, stating she would vote yes. It's becoming increasingly hard for Moldova to survive as a democracy and resist Russia. And the global situation is very dangerous. So this is an admission from a president, a European president, that the global situation is dangerous at the moment. Things are not good. And Russia is able to still massively influence public opinion in Moldova. And that is leading to a great deal of instability and a prediction that things will only get more challenging. And so she says in this, look, if a referendum was held again, I would vote as a president of Moldova, this independent state that's taken its independence from Romania. I would vote to reunify with Romania, because on our own, we are going to struggle to cope with overt Russian influence in our country. And I think that's a really very candid admission, but also I think an acceptance as to how much power Russia wields in Eastern Europe, and that it is so difficult, especially on your own outside of the EU, to be able to deal with this disinformation. But I think much more needs to be done within the EU, within the UK. I mean, I could talk an awful lot today about Grok and AI and Elon Musk and information or IT regulation. I'm not going to a huge degree. I've got a bit of that set up for a separate video. But we're at the moment in Parliament, there's been this push in the UK for Elon Musk's X to be regulated due to the AI model Grok being able to produce sexualized images of women and children, well, men as well, right? But without consent. And this has been really challenged by people. You have arguments as to whether, it's like Second Amendment rights in the US, whereby what is it that kills someone? Is it the gun or is it the person with the gun? Let's not punish a gun. Let's not stop having a gun. We need to think about the end user of the gun. So you get this argument as we shouldn't regulate the gun. We shouldn't regulate Grok or Twitter. We should look at the end user and blame them. Whereas in reality, it's a mixture of them both. So, for example, you wouldn't say cocaine, right? It's fine to make cocaine. It's only if you take cocaine. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, if we do have an if drugs are illegal, I mean, it's slightly different because drugs are illegal in general, but it's the idea that, well, no, let's just blame the end user for taking this thing or for doing this thing or for acting on this, rather than looking at the whole system, the process, and trying to regulate that so that we have safety and security for our populations going forward. So I think you're going to see a lot of these arguments be thrown around at the moment, and the UK is looking at how it's going to deal with Elon Musk at the moment. And there are some people calling for him to be regulated. He's then attacking the UK. Then our politicians are going to be very wary about what to do about him, especially since we are in bed with a lot of big tech. So Palantir, and we're going to come to Palantir later because it turns out that Greenland has a lot to do with Palantir and big tech, maybe, in terms of why the US is so interested in Greenland. This is something I talked about the other day, and some people are like, no, don't be silly. But actually, it looks like there really is some pressure coming from the tech industries. And anyway, there's that every nation, I think every modern nation at the moment, relies so heavily on tech that it's hard to get away from relying on big tech. And so therefore, when you challenge big tech have a hold over you in your societies and in your countries to a degree where we unfortunately appear to be having to walk in lockstep with big tech, that we can't really stand up to these huge entities, and that's definitely a concern. Anyway, I think where I was going with this is the EU and Europe and nations as a whole need to stand up to the tech industry to help us with regard to disinformation and things like Russian disinformation. It all works hand in glove, in my opinion. Okay, we're then going to go on to this, and I did talk about this the other day in the preamble to my military aid video, but I think it's very much a geopolitical aspect. This, with Donald Trump in a New York Times interview has claimed that Zelensky has no cards and never did, not even from day one. When asked what Ukraine has now, he replied only one thing: Donald Trump. It's quite incredible, this, and this really tells you what he feels about Zelensky and Ukraine, but also what I was talking about at the end of my hits and losses video this morning. One of the comments from Davy Boy, who was saying that possibly Trump was surprised at how much support Ukraine has had from Europe. And I think he probably forgets things all the time, or like goes back to his default setting. But there are times I'm sure when Trump has thought that Ukraine would just capitulate and fall apart. But actually, Ukraine are getting helped significantly by Europe. And Trump thinks that the US has given $350 billion free dollars to Ukraine. And now he's come along and stopped that. And therefore, Ukraine will just crumble because Europe aren't giving anything. I've been telling everyone that Europe's doing nothing for Ukraine. EU's doing nothing for Ukraine. But actually, all of these allies have been doing huge amounts, including Japan and Canada and Australia and New Zealand. They're all pitching in to help Ukraine. And actually, when Trump and the Americans stood back, Ukraine didn't capitulate. That actually they do have cards. So David Sanger here asks or speaks to Trump, says, look, you famously sat in this room and told Zelensky you don't have the cards back in February. Trump said, that's true. Well, he doesn't have the cards. He didn't have the cards from day one. So Trump genuinely thinks that Ukraine resisting Russia for 4 years, 3 years before Trump got into power, 3 years then, Zelensky had zero cards. That the Kharkiv counteroffensive and the lightning counteroffensive, counteroffensive in Kharkiv and then down in Kherson, that those two were carried out with no cards, that Ukraine had no cards. I don't think he understands the war. I don't think he knows enough about the war. So he literally thinks that Ukraine has just been pummeled from day one, that hasn't actually pushed back and retaken 50% of the land they initially lost to the Russians in those first months of the war. Trump doesn't understand that. He thinks they had no cards from day one and they don't have any cards now. He goes on to say, as David Sanger then says, so he didn't have them, cards. Does he have them now? No, he doesn't, says Trump. He does not. And what does that mean to your mind? He has not yet given up on territory, and he has, Trump interrupts, he's only got one thing. What? Donald Trump. Trump is so self-obsessed that he thinks the only thing that that Zelensky has in this war, the only card that he has to play, is Donald Trump. The reality is, Zelensky doesn't want Donald Trump. He doesn't like Trump. He doesn't need Trump. What he needs is American intelligence and for the US not to turn coat and go and help Russia directly. He needs America's assistance in the intelligence domain to maintain, right? And then for Europe to consistently help Ukraine in the way that they are at the moment. So this idea that Trump has, this understanding of the war is so unbelievably poor. I can't get over it. Now, I like the fact, and this goes to kind of what I was just talking about. So there's a bit of a natural flow here. The government offices of Sweden have written to Kaja Kallas in the EU and said, our efforts to constrain Russia are having clear effects. So this is the idea that, do you know what, together in the EU, we are having an effect on Russia. This is a card that is being played on behalf of Zelensky. Zelensky has this card by proxy. For example, the sanctions imposed against Russia's energy sector and shadow fleet have substantially reduced the revenues available for Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We need to continue to put more pressure on Russia to respond to Russia's continuing attacks against Ukraine and to weaken Russia's position in negotiations. To this end, we ask for the following measures to be included in the proposal for EU's 20th sanctions package and encourage coordination with G7 partners accordingly. A full maritime services ban against any ship transporting Russian carbon-based energy resources from Russian ports. This would substantially increase the transportation costs for Russia and ensure that no EU entity is involved in supporting this trade. Now, this is very important. In my hits and losses video this morning, I talked to you about some Russian views that were coming in the context of looking forward to what's going to happen in the hydrocarbons exports market, that actually they were expecting 10 to 15% increase. Was it 10 to 15% increase in costs? And that's exactly what would come about here, like huge effect on the ability for Russia to transport their oil and gas, and that would send up the cost. So Europe has some serious key cards to be able to play still. Strengthen measures against Russian export of fertilizers to the EU. Fertilizers are the third largest category of goods exported from Russia to the EU. The import quotas are currently so generous that the trade is in practice unhindered. Removal of the value threshold for luxury items. That European luxury goods have a symbolic and political significance beyond their monetary value. Luxury goods should not be exported to Russia regardless of their price tag. And that will obviously not play very well with people who like to export their goods to Russia. So you can imagine there'll be a bit of pushback to that. And also, yeah, the export or the import of fertilizers to the EU, very important, the agricultural industry. If you're going to start sanctioning those or put embargoes on that or whatever, then that will ramp up costs for European agricultural businesses, and then that will be inflationary, and therefore they will be less competitive around the world. So there would be some pushback to that, but a full maritime services ban to me sounds pretty sound. Now, as I mentioned the other day, Lindsey Graham's been big on talking up this bill that's been hanging around, the Blumenthal-Lindsey Graham bill that's supposed to put 500% tariffs on countries like China and India who buy Russian hydrocarbons. He says after a very productive meeting with President Trump on a variety of issues, he greenlit this bipartisan bill. So Trump has that bill to be able to put into use, but of course it relies on that, I mean, properly going through. I don't think it's had, I look forward to a strong bipartisan vote. So they're not voted on it yet, but Trump seemed to be up for putting that to the vote. But of course, then it just lands on Trump's desk and he might sign it. But actually within that bill is the mechanism that it gets decided by Trump. So it's Trump's weapon to use. And if he chooses not to use it, then the thing's pointless. But anyway, the Americans here talking it up there. And here we have, in the same context here, the UK possibly tightening maritime rules around Russian LNG. Sanctions aren't about gas, they're about ships. The UK is not possibly, it is tightening maritime rules around Russian LNG. The EU still hasn't hit the Arc 7 icebreaking tankers that keep the Arctic exports moving year round. Here's why that matters and why Moscow can't easily replace them. So what you can do is you can start putting pressure on these icebreakers that then break the ice so that these tankers can move stuff around in the Arctic regions. This is why the Black Sea is so freaking important. Novorossiysk, Tuapse, these ports that can transport Russian oil from warm water. These are warm water ports. they don't freeze up. Whereas, up north, things become expensive and less efficient. And if you can then hammer them with sanctions, and I believe that there's only one icebreaker working around one particular area at the moment up there. Russia really, they're on the edge up there in the north, and so that is a weakness for the Russians for sure. We are hearing today, talking about, again, in this context, here Tendar talks about 2, but apparently there are 4 tankers that have been hit by Ukrainian drones. I don't think seriously, but there's certainly a bit of a concerted effort on these tankers. Russian regime channels are quoting Bloomberg and RIA report that at least 2 crude oil tankers of the Russian Shadow Fleet have been struck in the Black Sea, the Matilda and the Delta Harmony. According to these sources, the ships were about to load oil when they were hit by drones. The cargo equipment was damaged. Both tankers are currently close to the Russian seaport of Novorossiysk, according to marine traffic. There are possibly more tankers under attack and damage. Situation is fluid. We hear from Reuters that 4 tankers have been hit near the CPC oil terminal in Russia. 4 Greek-managed oil tankers, this is how important Greece is in the shipment of Russian hydrocarbons, struck by unidentified drones near the Russian Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal in the Black Sea. Delta Harmony, Matilda, Freud, and Delta Supreme, they were en route to load Kazakh oil. So maybe not Russian oil there, but Russia would probably take a transportation cut in that. Ukraine has not commented. Estonia has barred entry to hundreds of Russian soldiers and militants linked to the war against Ukraine, calling them a direct security threat due to their hostility toward Europe, combat experience, and criminal past. Interior Minister Taro urged EU states to create a unified blacklist. So 261 Russian citizens barred from entry into Estonia, those who have fought in the war. Good stuff. Good to see Estonia being strong on that. Now, this is probably really important news here. Incredibly important. I've already talked about tech and Elon Musk. Elon Musk owns however many thousands of satellites in near Earth orbit. He has almost a monopoly up in space, and this just adds to the sheer power that man has. Well, we understand that Airbus, which is this European conglomerate, has been awarded a contract by Eutelsat Group to build a further 340 low Earth orbit, so not near Earth, low Earth orbit, OneWeb satellites. The satellites will be manufactured at Airbus Defence and Space's Toulouse facility. I taught in Toulouse for a year, on a newly installed production line with delivery from the end of 2026. Yeah, that's really good. So this builds a real European alternative to Starlink, which is essential for European digital sovereignty and strategic independence. Absolutely vital, that there is, and not actually just for Europe, but for the world, for the US as well. You don't want a single human being having that much power and essentially having a monopoly. Power focused in one individual, especially when it comes to international communications and communication security. You either want free market operating, or you want things like NASA and like national services doing a lot of the work. But to allow a Bond villain essentially to have so much power is very scary indeed. Now, I haven't done any videos specifically on Iran, but Iran is going off on one, obviously, at the moment. Now, I did report on this last time there were issues in Iran, if you remember, over the last 4 years. I can't remember what happened, whether there were some other protests. What was it? But anyway, Iran went down, or internet went down in Iran, or whatever it was that happened previously. And then Scottish independence online, I would say people, but bots and trolls really, went silent. And this was seen, and it was reported by UK Defence Journal then, and I reported from a previous one that they had written, that actually, and this is not a comment on the Scottish independence. I know there's a few of you in my threads who are very pro-Scottish independence. This has nothing to do with whether that is a good thing, and it is your right to self-determination, all that. Yeah, forget the merits or not of that. But how interesting is it that a network of social media accounts posing as Scottish independent supporters have again fallen silent, closely mirroring a fresh shutdown of internet access inside Iran. So if you haven't realized, Starlink's been blocked, so which is very interesting itself. So talking about Starlink, it was supposed to be this all singing, all dancing, you can't block Starlink, blah, blah, blah. And then Iran, apparently together with Russia, have blocked Starlink in Iran. So people can't access the internet. In fact, they've had 10 days essentially without the internet. I think some people are like piggybacking on Iraqi internet or with Iraqi SIMs or something like that. But essentially, there is a bit of an internet blackout in Iran, but at the same time, this has led to bot farms and troll farms not being able to work, and there are clearly Scottish independent bot farms or elements to the bots and trolls. This will be the case with pro-Russia in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, people upsetting the apple cart in the United States. I'm sure it's not just Scottish independence that has been affected here, but in this UK Defence Journal has been looking at these Scottish independence profiles on Twitter and elsewhere, and saw how they were affected previously, and they've been affected yet again by the shutdown in Iranian internet. So that's pretty fascinating. Okay, so there are all these big old protests going on, but I was watching the BT News last night, and they were pretty much saying, they were showing that they had some pro-Iranian government, not protests, but massive people, all the flags and holding all the stuff up, obviously paid up pro-government kind of scare quote supporters in I presume the Central Square or whatever, and they had the president and other governmental people in amongst the crowds. And because there's an internet blackout, you can be forgiven for thinking that the protests are largely over, and actually they've stamped their authority back on the masses and look at these pro-government people. But actually, you know, there's a selection bias, there's a skew in what we're being able to access, and protests are probably still going on an awful lot. But at the same time, the Iranian government has really, really come down heavily on the protesters. So the Iranian government, I think, has admitted that there have been 2,000 that have been killed. And people are saying, well, if the government's saying that, it's going to be way more than that. So some are estimating that maybe 10,000 protesters have been killed. 10,000. If that is the case, then that is phenomenal. So some people have been saying Iran is on the brink of collapsing. It is going to be this really successful set of protests that brings about the fall of the Islamic Republic regime. And other people are saying, hold your horses, mate. If I was a betting man, I would be, I'm not going to bet on this because it's 50-50. I mean, roulette, you might as well. It's I don't know. I just don't know which way this will go, because if you don't have large scale access to sort of weaponry and the police and security forces en masse changing sides, we have heard stories of them changing sides, and that has, I think, been really useful. But if that doesn't happen in a massive way, then the government still has a chance to come down really heavily on these, and just by force and oppression, just, you know, unfortunately, they could quash these protests. But these have been the biggest protests, I think, since 1972. Was it 72, 79? Whenever it was. What will happen, I don't know. Anton Gerashenko this morning says the situation has escalated into total confrontation and information war. The regime is even shutting down Starlink, which means they must be using new electronic warfare, which would have been received from Russia or China. So that thing alone is very important, that they managed to shut down Starlink, and who's been helping them do that. BBC's Iranian service report, citing data from NetBlocks, a global internet monitoring organization, that internet access in Iran has been blocked for more than 108 hours. This is the regime's attempt to create an information vacuum to push down the protests. These actions have led to an almost complete halt to the operations of banks, serious issues with logistics. According to reports, Iran's authorities have resumed access to phone networks today, and access to the internet might start resuming within 48 hours. Islamic elites are now making their choice. Someone is taking their families abroad. Some decide to stay with the regime to the end. This is also a sign that there won't be a soft scenario or of a transit of power. Radicalization is growing on both sides. The authorities are using firearms, killing, maiming, arresting, and publicly executing protesters. In response, mosques and government buildings are set on fire. Protests do not stop. Everyone is waiting for actions by the United States. Despite all the challenges in Ukraine, we keep up with the events in Iran. My solidarity is with the brave and courageous people fighting for their freedom in Iran. Now, the US has a big decision to make here. Do they get involved? Some people are saying this is the moment. This is the moment to get involved in Iran. There's never been a better moment. But you've got to be very wary of regime change activities. And Trump has very clearly campaigned on no regime change activity. Then he's gone and literally kidnapped a regime from Venezuela. He's trying to take over Greenland, and he's making side eyes at Canada and Mexico, and then Colombia and Cuba. So the guy's got, he's smelling blood, Trump. So it wouldn't surprise me if he tries to get involved here. My position is that, and I said this morning, I would like to see the US get involved in Iran, only because it would take the eye off Greenland, Canada, Mexico, and Ukraine. Like, for the good of all these other countries, go and get involved in Iran and get into a hot mess there, Trump, because actually it give everyone else a breather. I know that sounds horrible. Like, it's almost like I'm not doing it for the good of Iran. I'm doing it for the good of everyone else. A local in Kermanshah, says no reports, connected via Iraqi SIM, reports the city is locked down with checkpoints. Forces from Khazir-e-Shirin, Ravansar, Pava, and Javanrud have been deployed. Thursday saw a massacre. Gunfire echoed through Taki Bostan Boulevard. It is not nice in Iran, is it at all? I'm pretty sure there are going to be some serious deaths taking place in Iran. So that's all I'm going to say about Iran at the moment, but it is well worth keeping an eye on that. Let's have a look at what you guys are saying. Viggo Holmson here says, why have I disappeared? Viggo Holmson says, ATPGEO bombing in the IRGC is interference. However, aiding a domestic insurgent isn't initiating one. Yeah, it's not about initiating one there. But I don't know what's going on. Why have I disappeared? I don't know if I've disappeared for you. I appear to be not. There I am, back again. Yeah, so you need to be really careful there. But it is aiding a protest that has already been initiated. Yeah, then that, I would really like the Iranian regime to be unseated for sure. But I wouldn't begin to know what best to do in that situation. But I just do feel that Trump really needs a major distraction away from what's going on everywhere else in the world. Now, I'm going to move on, though, from Iran. Sorry, there was some weird things going on. I was going to read a few more of your comments out. Aussie Bugger says the Iranian protesters' chants are mostly calling for the return of the Shah. Shah has a transition plan. No need for foreign troops. Intel comms and targeted strikes on regime may tip the balance. Yeah, that's what I mean. But I don't necessarily mean. I don't actually mean troops. You never put troops in Iran. But it's about whether you bomb like comms or bases of internal security and whatnot. I'm not saying he should do that, but that if he's going to do anything, it'd be something like that, right? What you want to do is just force the. It's a bit like Putin. You want to force them to the negotiating table, force them to make a change. I'm going to go now to this, which is, and we're going to start looking at interference of the US imperially in other places around the world. I just talked about that with regard to Iran and saying, well, I can see a justification for that. But actually, the US administration, the Trump administration, is doing this in all sorts of ways in Europe and very directly. So we've had, Munich Security Conference speeches from JD Vance and, people like Vance and even Rubio at times, really denigrating Europe, Elon Musk particularly, really denigrating Europe and trying to have, for example, AfD do well in Germany. The Romanian, a lot of people in the Trump administration were really upset that the Romanian presidential race was, well, the elections were initially cancelled and then rescheduled because of the Russian interference. But lots of people were, including Elon Musk, were calling on that being, anti-democratic and so on and so forth. There is this real appetite for people in the Trump administration to have the far right, and it's written in their national security strategy to do well in Europe, to basically cause disunity in the European Union, right? And then you see Secretary Kennedy. So this is the Human and Health Services, like the health secretary, Robert Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., coming out and saying reports like, imagine an American health secretary saying this in previous administrations. Just imagine any administration you can think of. Reports coming out of Germany show a government sidelining patient autonomy and limiting people's abilities to act on their own convictions when they face medical decisions. That is why Friday I sent a letter to Germany's Federal Minister of Health, Nina Vorking. In my letter, I made it clear that Germany has the opportunity and the responsibility to correct this trajectory, to restore medical autonomy, to end politically motivated prosecutions, and to uphold the rights that anchor every democratic nation. What the fricking hell is he doing, telling Germany how to run their healthcare system? Like, the overreach at the moment from the Trump administration is absolutely egregious. As this person says, what the F does Kennedy think he is? Who the F does he think he is? Germany is a sovereign country, not a US colony. But this is actually reflective of a broader situation where the US is, on the one hand, sort of pulling out of all these international organizations. So here are the 60, was it 31 and 35? So 66 different organizations they pulled out of, things to do with disinformation in anti-disinformation in Europe, but a lot to do with all sorts of different international organizations, a lot to do with energy, actually, and renewable energy and environmentalism and blah, 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 but a lot to do with all sorts of different things. There are a lot of UN agencies, as you can see there. So they really don't want to be a member of the UN. They don't want to be actively or be active participants in trying to drive the world on to be a better place by having a say in all these international organizations. They want to pull out, go isolate to the United States, but at the same time, territorial expand into Greenland, have a bit of Venezuela, maybe Panama, Cuba, Colombia, Canada, Mexico, and at the same time tell everyone else how to run their freaking countries. So we're gonna pull out these organizations where we could actually have some input on the direction of travel for countries with regard to these different sort of organizational domains. But so we're going to pull out these, but we're going to tell you that you need to do this or else what? And it's like, you need to have you need to take your foot off social media regulation or big tech regulation and tech taxes. There's a real sense that the United States is wanting to, particularly with neighbors, doesn't do it with Russia, like Russia and China. Like, when does Kennedy say anything about the health services in Russia and China? Honestly, for feck's sake. Right, so he's coming to Germany, to one of the most, well-operating democracies in the world, right, and having a go at them for something, but he doesn't say anything about China and Russia and their healthcare practices. Honestly, it's absolutely outrageous. And at the same time, as I told you the other day, you've got Donald Trump saying he's the acting president of Venezuela. Like, it might be tongue-in-cheek, it might be presidential trolling, but you're the president. You shouldn't be trolling the world. You shouldn't be on social media wanging on about pretending to be the president of Venezuela, which means that you really do think you're the president of Venezuela. Let's be honest about it. It's absolutely incredible that he'll be spreading this on his social media platform, talking about how he's the acting president of Venezuela, and at the same time saying that, showing pictures of him smoking Cuban cigars in front of a Cuban flag as if he's going to be the next president of Cuba. Like, this imperialistic expansion into the wider world. Okay, that's the Monroe Doctrine. That's your neck of the woods. Maybe you could build up some kind of justification for that. But to then tell Germany how to run their health services, honestly, bugger off. And you know you're doing the wrong thing when Russia tell you you're doing the right thing. So when Medvedev comes out and states that seizing Greenland by the US would be, quote, useful for improving the global climate, you know invading Greenland ain't going to be a good idea. It is to the benefit of Russia. Furthermore, Medvedev urged Trump to hurry lest a, quote, sudden referendum be held in Greenland. Quick, do it now before they can hold a vote. Quick, invade them. After which Russia would, quote, create a new 90th federal subject. Just, So then we get on to, I told you so, when I said that Peter Thiel and his lot did have an interest in Greenland. It turns out that that is indeed the case. Follow the money, follow the marionette's strings to the puppeteer. Trump invades Greenland. Peter Thiel's PayPal and Palantir team propose a freedom city via jointly funded startup Praxis on the island. The free city would have minimal government intervention using blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. Residents can choose to opt in or opt out by contract. Praxis is a startup that has received funding from Pronomos Capital, a venture firm in which Peter Thiel is an investor. This is textbook colonialism. This is tech authoritarianism. I told you about this before. He doesn't believe in democracies. Peter Thiel doesn't believe in democracies. All these tech oligarchs, they want tech companies to be able to dictate governance, essentially. So Forbes has written about this. These billionaires bet big on Greenland after Trump took an interest. So Forbes, this is the 9th of January, so from about 4 days ago, just months after President Trump first expressed interest in the United States possibly gaining control over Greenland, some of the richest people in the world, including Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Michael Bloomberg, began making strategic investments in the mineral-rich island. Interesting that Forbes focuses on people who are otherwise involved with not the Republican Party, maybe the Democrats or otherwise, rather than focusing on Ronald Lauder, who they put first, as Sam Altman, Peter Thiel. But anyway, Ronald Lauder, the heir to the Estee Lauder fortune, is credited with giving Trump the idea of taking over Greenland during his first term. Former White House National Security Advisor John Bolton confirmed to Forbes. Lauder has since invested, according to the Danish newspaper Politiken, in an unprofitable Greenlandic freshwater bottling company co-owned by Jørgen Wever Johansen, local chair of the governing Siumut party in Nuuk, and husband to Greenland's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vivian Motzfeldt, raising concerns about political interference. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Michael Bloomberg have all invested since 2019 in Cobalt Metals, which looks for valuable rare earth minerals used in electronic devices through AI-powered exploration of the island. Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, invested in Cobalt in 2022. Peter Thiel, the PayPal and Palantir tech titan, funded in an early 2021, the startup Praxis, which aims to build a technologically advanced freedom city on the island. So it goes on to talk about all these in detail. You can go and read this at your leisure. But the idea is that there are very, very rich people who have the ear of the president and are whispering sweet nothings about Greenland. And so it won't just be about all the reasons I've given before. Well, I did give this reason. This was one of the reasons. And it's just more evidence that there is more to this than meets the eye. Yes, it's probably about undoing NATO. Yes, it's probably about his ego and his legacy and so on and so forth. But I don't really think it's about security, because they can get that security with Denmark in control of Greenland as it is. So this is all about, I think, these other reasons and rare earth minerals and so on and so forth. Now, Republican Congressman Randy Fine has introduced a Greenland annexation bill amid White House threats. He introduced a bill in the US Congress on January the 12th that aims to authorize the annexation of Greenland and grant the territory statehood amid White House threats to seize the autonomous Danish territory. It's quite incredible. So yeah, huge news. Today, I'm proud to introduce the Greenland Annexation and Statehood Bill Act, a bill that allows the president to find the means necessary to bring Greenland into the Union. Let me be clear, our adversaries are trying to establish a foothold in the Arctic and we can't, blah, 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 blah. Congressman Randy Fine has introduced that annexation bill. Now, there was some words he used. It was something like, come what may or something. See if I can find it. But it wasn't just like, here's an annexation bill. It was like, yippity-doo-dah, we're going to do this. Yeah, woo. It was like really, I think, yeah, really insane what is going on with these people. See if I can find the language. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if someone else can. But anyway, it is. Oh yeah, it was by any means necessary. That was it. My goodness. So here it is. A Republican congressman just introduced legislation authorizing President Trump to annex Greenland, quote, by any means necessary. So the bill is literally to give permission to militarily invade Greenland. I mean, it won't get through. You'd hope it wouldn't get through Congress, right? So Randy Fine's Greenland Annexation and Statehood Act comes at the worst possible time for Europe as Ukraine's war against Russian invasion enters its fifth year. European leaders now find themselves pulled in two directions, defending a NATO ally from Washington while depending on Washington to help defend Ukraine. So this is exactly what Russia would want. And that's why you got Medvedev saying, what a great idea. Greenland's government responded on Monday, we cannot under any circumstances accept a US takeover. Russi Roll United Services Institute analyst Edward Arnold called the crisis, quote, an absolute gift to Putin. As he put it, quote, Russia can't defeat NATO militarily. It's too powerful, so it needs to defeat NATO politically. Danish and Greenlandic efforts meet Secretary of State meet Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance in Washington on Wednesday. I honestly, what are you doing, United States of America? Randy Fine, just sod off. And J.D. Vance, if you are going to be up for this as well, this is just what Putin wants. It is just insane. Ole Jolson, the Greenlandic leader, says the United States has once again reiterated its desire to take over Greenland. This is something the governing coalition of Greenland cannot accept under any circumstances. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark as a constituent part of the realm. Greenland is a member of NATO, and the defense of Greenland must therefore take place through NATO. On the basis of the very positive statements made for Greenland by 6 NATO member states, Naalakkersuisut will intensify its efforts to ensure that the defense of Greenland is carried out within the NATO framework. All NATO member states, including the US, share a common interest in the defense of Greenland, and the governing coalition of Greenland will therefore work together with Denmark to ensure that dialogue on and the development of Greenland's defense takes place within NATO cooperation. The governing coalition of Greenland believes that Greenland will, now and into the future, remain a part of the Western Defence Alliance. And that's coming from the government of Greenland itself. So they are not up for it, but my goodness, it's all happening. Nordic diplomats have rejected Trump's claim of Russian and Chinese vessels operating near Greenland, which he has invoked to justify the desire to seize island from Denmark. Remember, he said they're teeming, the waters are teeming with Russian and Chinese vessels. And they're like, no, it's not. 2 top Nordic diplomats said there were no signs of Russian and Chinese ships or submarines in and around Greenland. It's just absolute lies. Quote, it simply is not true that the Chinese and Russians are there. I have seen the intelligence. There are no ships, no submarines, one senior diplomat said. Another from a different Nordic country added, submarines are in the Arctic, yes, but on the Russian side. Espen Barth Eide, Norway's foreign minister, also rejected the claims. It is not correct that there is a lot of activity from Russia or China around Greenland, he told Norwegian broadcaster NRK this weekend. There is activity in our neighborhood, but around Greenland there is very little. So I wish that Trump would be corrected on this, that people on Fox News, for example, would be put straight on these claims. Now, to go across to Venezuela, it turns out that, according to this article in The Guardian, America is running Venezuela, apparently, but there are paramilitary squads running around looking for US citizens. So there's been a warning to get US citizens out of Venezuela because there are these retributive groups going around searching out for American citizens. And yet the US is like, yeah, we've done such a good job. We're running Venezuela, but no one really seems to know how the US is running it. They didn't seem to think that far. They did this amazing military operation. They used this new secret sonic weapon that they apparently bought off whoever was doing the Havana syndrome thing. They made people's ears and noses bleed and all that kind of stuff, and they nicked Maduro. But then no one had a plan for what to do next. Absolutely incredible. So we have Shashank Joshi here, quoting from Politico. It's an insane plan. Senator Chris Murphy told Politico, coming out of a briefing Wednesday with Trump administration officials on Venezuela. Quote, they are proposing to steal Venezuela's oil at gunpoint forever and use that as leverage to run the country. And this is what I was telling you the other day, the idea that they're taking the oil from Venezuela, saying, hey, we're not stealing the oil. What we're doing is controlling the flow of the cash. They're going to take that cash, put it in a foreign banks, US accounts and foreign banks outside of the Treasury. Trump somehow have oversight over that. That's dodgy. And then give some of that money back to Venezuela and then force Venezuela to buy with that money explicitly US equipment. You're like, really? Wow. So it's exactly what Chris Murphy here says, which is we are proposing to steal Venezuela's oil at gunpoint forever and use that leverage to run the country. Just incredible. So a US oil investor to the Financial Times on Venezuela said no one wants to go in there when a random effing tweet can change the entire foreign policy. So you've got this idea, and Trump met with these big oil execs the other day, got them all in a room, was saying how amazing it is that the US is going to make all this money and they're going to have all this massive investment. He's talking about quote, tremendous investment from US oil companies, and they'll get that money back either from the sale of the oil or he said from US taxpayers. So it's like, wow. So US taxpayers are going to bankroll these oil executives, these oil companies, as they go into Venezuela and have to put huge investment down. But you've got oil investors that themselves going, nah, this is a ridiculous idea. No one wants to go in there if some random effing tweet from Trump is going to change foreign policy. Venezuelan oil won't flood the market, says Lucas Ekwuemi. According to Rystad Energy, restoring Venezuela's oil production will be slow and capital intensive. I've been through all the details here, but just to remind you, 53 billion is required over the next 15 years to maintain flat production. So just not to do anything else, just to keep it as it is, 53 billion. Only 300 kpbd, so that's 300,000 barrels per day can be restored quickly. Reaching 3 million barrels per day by 2040 would require $183 billion in capex, in capital expenditure. This is not a short-term supply story. It's a long-term supply story in a risky jurisdiction. The idea that Venezuelan oil will suddenly crash prices is a fantasy. So Rystad Energy talking about how it's just not going to happen in a way that Trump is promising. And yet he got ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, Chevron, blah, 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 got them in this room, and they all told Trump in their own ways that they won't, but he hears what he wants to hear, unless he's kind of told otherwise. But he is like, yeah, I got all these people, you're gonna invest, and everyone's like, yeah, okay, sort of, yeah. And he's like, yeah, I told you, yeah, they're all gonna invest, brilliant, this is going to be a success story. But in reality, they didn't really say that. And in fact, ExxonMobil said it's uninvestable. So Exxon was most direct, called Venezuela uninvestable, and described the huge lift needed to change that. So in order for it not to be uninvestable, in order to invest there, you've got to spend an absolute ton. This is what your man said.
We first got into Venezuela back in the 1940s. We've had our assets seized there twice. And so you can imagine to re-enter a third time would require some pretty significant changes from what we've historically seen here and what is currently the state.
It would need significant changes from what we have seen here and what the current state is. There would need to be significant changes, and that's going to be in security. That's boots on the ground, one way or the other.
If we look at the legal and commercial constructs and frameworks in place today in Venezuela, today it's uninvestable.
It is uninvestable. Legal and commercial frameworks, it is uninvestable, he said. Now, it's worth going, sorry, I'm going to play you a few video clips of stuff I've been watching, but here is The Economist talking with Vijay Vaitheswaran, so The Economist Global Energy and Climate Innovation Editor, about how this isn't what Trump thinks it is. It's just not.
There's no doubt the most important factor is the oil price. That's the single most powerful determinant of whether companies invest or not. Especially now that the big oil companies have all made strong commitments on shareholder returns to their boards and to their shareholders. And so at an oil price where we are today, with the marketplace talking about even heading down to $50 a barrel, this is not an environment in which anybody wants to make investments. Venezuela may, on some measures, require $80 per barrel or higher on a sustained basis. Bear in mind, these are investments that require 10 to 20 years worth of certainty in order to pay back. There's no investor in their right mind that, in the soft outlook that we have today, would make significant investments in Venezuela for expansion of output.
I think it's really important. So at the price of oil at the moment, and bear in mind, it's going down and down, and Russia are giving crazy discounts. Like, companies are not going to say, right, we can only get $50 a barrel at the moment, so let's go and whack $50 billion into Venezuela. Oh, why would we do that? We're only going to get $50 a barrel. That price needs to go way up before they even start considering it. So it's just not going to happen. So this quick win for Trump simply won't happen.
It's easy to imagine the prospect that, this is actually fairly short-lived in terms of their headline effect. I think it's very clear from the administration that they like immediate short-term wins, that they're probably less concerned with extremely long, drawn-out drilling and exploration operations and making sure that property rights in Venezuela are adequately protected over decades. It's a little bit more difficult to imagine, but I keep coming back to the fact that this is all completely different now because the US is a net exporter of energy. I remember watching the film W, the Oliver Stone film about George W. Bush, which sort of flicks between true to life and sort of deeply conspiratorial. And there's a scene in it where I think it's Dick Cheney sort of stands up in the Situation Room and points to a map of the Middle East and essentially lays out America's imperial program and all the oil fields they would capture. But in the mid-2000s, that all felt very real, in the sense that it did, the presumption was America is going to run out of oil, right? And it already needs so much oil from the rest of the world. And this is a resource that's running out globally. And it felt very tense. And in this example, it feels a lot less tense, sort of a lot less important, in large part because America is awash with oil, more oil than it knows what to do with.
This is so freaking important. This is why I wanted to play this. It's like not just about the price of oil, but the US has loads of oil. There's an oil glut in the world. Literally, they're overproducing oil at the moment. And that is the single worst time you want to put massive investment into low return scenario where people are transitioning away from oil to renewables. And we're going to look at that in a second. So Trump is and it's really interesting what they go on to talk about here. Trump is living in the 90s, the 80s and 90s. He's doing that with tariffs, and he's doing that with Venezuela. And actually, he's just out of touch. The man is out of touch.
Which is why it exports so much abroad.
And Mike, that's almost another tariff parallel, which is that this all feels a little old school, doesn't it? And we talked on the show about how Trump's view of tariffs is shaped in like the 80s by the scare about Japan, and that's a bit like how some of this let's go in and seize the oil because it's a scarce resource. Actually, no, it's not. America's a net oil exporter, and the world's in an oil glut. And just Trump's not a man who updates his views. It's just just one of those facts of the world.
I think the other way in which it's similar to tariffs is that if you're the marginal driller in the US, despite the fact that this is a political constituency that's pretty pro-Trump in general, but that the US policy explicitly is sort of screwing you over, right? First, it was all of your capital equipment suddenly much more expensive. Any non-US labor that you want to use is increasingly going out the window. And now you're being hit with this supposed attempt to generate lots of oil from countries outside the US, where it doesn't provide US jobs, and it doesn't provide necessarily profits for smaller exploration companies. So yeah, it's funny because it's a sector that's got who they wanted in office and then sort of suffered from it, really.
I'll go even further than that. I would say that big oil will come to regret its support for Trump.
Listen to that. He's saying big oil will come to regret its support for Trump.
And we saw in Trump 1.0, despite the drill baby drill rhetoric coming out and the attempts to roll back environmental regulations, more wind and solar was installed during that time, Trump 1, than in all of American history prior. And we're going to continue to see big oil suffering under Trump 2.0 and continued decarbonization, increase in clean energies ongoing in America is my prediction. And so this will come to be seen not as the revival, but maybe the last gasp of a dying industry.
Well,
So
that feels like a perfect.
Is it the last gasp of a dying industry? That's absolutely fascinating. I keep talking about renewables, how it's fascinating if you look at where they are in the world, Africa and places like Pakistan. In fact, they talk about Pakistan here, but if you look at the EMBA report on global energy usage and production around the world, it is fascinating to see. So just to give you an idea that Trump is living in the past to some degree. And he looks at these wind turbines and he says, he thinks that China's producing them, so we want to go oil and coal or oil and gas. And he's just like, mate, you need to future-proof your economy and you need to get in there amongst it. Like Obama, remember, he said we should be leading in green tech. That wasn't about Obama being environmentalist. That was about Obama saying that's the future. And if we're not ahead of the industries in the future, we are going to be left behind by the likes of China. And that's exactly what is happening. So check this out.
Goals. The US has peaked. Europe has peaked.
Carbon emissions
Different countries have peaked at different times. China's overall emissions are probably close to flattening out. The reason is largely the tremendous growth in renewable energy.
China's emissions peak will largely contribute to a global emissions peak. The story really traces all the way back to more than 2 decades ago. China faced an energy security challenge, and of course, the air pollution situation really drove China's pivot away from coal-fired power plant. The decision makers in China believe that they should really pursue a set of clean tech sectors, started with wind and then solar.
Renewable technologies are now 10% of China's GDP. They produce
renewable technologies are 10% of China's GDP.
80% of the world's solar panels, 70% of the wind turbines, and huge numbers of electric cars.
No one probably could foresee that we could have ventured this far, right, by 2025. The massive domestic market in China also helped a lot of manufacturers to scale up, and by doing so, further cut production cost. Compared to production elsewhere in the world, for example, in the US, China is more efficient and cheaper. Increasingly, China is exporting a lot of solar panels, solar products.
Solar is booming throughout the global south. There are very few countries where it isn't taking off. A big driver for many countries is energy security. For example, Ethiopia has a lot of hydropower. Hydropower is becoming less reliable there because of droughts. So they were looking for an alternative source of electricity. One option was importing natural gas, but they didn't want to be subject to the vagaries of natural gas prices. So they opted for solar, and they have been importing tremendous amounts of Chinese solar technology. People in Pakistan who wanted continuous supply of power for their families would buy generators if they could afford one. But as Chinese solar cells became cheap, they moved in that direction. Mostly they're being used for sort of rooftop solar, sometimes combined with a battery, so that people could have electricity at night. It used to be that rooftops covered with solar panels, those were really things that you saw mostly in rich countries of the world. They were adopted because of climate policies, government subsidies. Now it's kind of a grassroots thing that is taking place in the global south because these forms of energy are practical and cheap.
So it's really, really freaking important that that the price has come down so considerably that actually it's price competitive. And that's the point, is that this isn't an environmental decision by people. Yes, originally when you had countries that wanted to reduce emissions, they're like, right, we're going to subsidize people putting solar panels on their roofs. But now in places like Pakistan, it's the grassroots movement. It's because it's cheap, and you're getting that in a global south. So what you're going to have is less and less demand comparatively for hydrocarbons, and then renewables are taking up more and more of a proportion of the production. So yeah, this is really important for understanding whether what Trump is doing in Venezuela is actually a sensible economic idea. Like, if you're living in the 1990s, and yeah, brilliant, let's go and get this really scarce resource that is oil, but this is really heavy oil. It requires loads of refining. It's very expensive and to sort out comparatively, and it's got, it requires all sorts of infrastructure. So this is much more difficult than other sources of oil. And then you've got to look at actually the oil industry right now. Is it a good idea? Well, no, because it's $50 a barrel. Okay, well, what about going forward? Well, going forward, actually, people are moving away, whether you like it or not, Donny. People are moving away to renewables, or looking at other alternatives, and so on and so forth. And actually, you're just barking up the wrong tree, arguably. Now, then we hear, because Exxon, the CEO from Exxon said, hey, this is an uninvestable option at the moment. Then US President Trump said on Sunday that he might block ExxonMobil, the largest oil company in the US, from investing in Venezuela after the company's here. So he didn't really react to that at the time, but when it's now come up and people have been clipping that and going back to him, it's uninvestable in Venezuela, he's got really angry because this is a big thing. So he's then said, I didn't like Exxon's response, Trump told reporters on Air Force One on his way back to Washington on Sunday. I'll probably be inclined to keep Exxon out. I didn't like their response. They're playing too cute. Well, if I was Exxon, I'd be like, well, fair enough. We said it was uninvestable, so we're not going to invest. So that gives us permission to carry on and doing what we're doing, which is getting on and doing whatever else. But yeah, I just thought that was, I think that's a really interesting discussion about global energy production and demand, and to move away from thinking about it in terms of environmentalism, but just in terms of the economy, and also future-proofing your economy in the direction of flow, really, in terms of what are things going to look like in 20 years' time, and do we need to be getting out bucket loads of heavy, tarry oil that requires an awful lot of effort to turn it into stuff that we need, when Chinese batteries at the moment are flying off in Norway. 97% of Norway's cars that were bought last year were electric cars. 97% in Norway, where it's cold and that's more difficult. Then you've got the new sodium batteries that are coming out that are resistant to fires. They have way more energy density than the existing batteries, that they can go for like 1 million miles, literally, like charge and recharge, charge and discharge, charge, discharge, 1 million miles, blah, 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 blah. So you've got these, and they're being already, like CATL, cattle, I don't know how you say it, but CATL, the big battery producer that actually Tesla uses, they're mass producing these batteries, right? And these are revolutionary. This is going to blow electric car usage potentially out into a new era. And so, you either get behind that, thinking, well, that's the future, or do you back oil? If you're thinking, yeah, in 20 years' time, we're still going to be busting around using these big, internal combustion engines, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe on ships, maybe here, maybe there. But in terms of general car use, like, I drive an electric car. Do you know what's nice? No fumes come out of my car. And yeah, you can talk about rare earth metals being quite polluting when you get them out the ground and process them. But people have done all sorts of different analyses, and by far and away, electric cars are way more environmentally friendly than internal combustion engines from start to finish, right? And that's done. Like, you can argue with me, but go and look at the data, go and look at the resources on that. But actually, and that is only getting better as they become even more efficient and cheaper. Now they're price comparable. That who would want to have air pollution in your city? Like, do you have a choice? I have a choice of breathing, like, I can sit by the exhaust of a petrol car, or a diesel car, or I can sit by the non-exhaust of an electric car. What would I rather do? Yeah, the latter, thanks. So it's just like, I don't understand why people just don't like change, right? And anyway, but if I was Trump trying to run my country, I'd be like, well, what's the future? Where can the United States be in terms of competing in the future? Because if you're not competing on battery production and renewable energy and all that kind of tech, then you're not in the right game. Anyway, enough on that. So Canada, defense planning there. The Department of National Defense began discussing the creation of a civil defense capability around the time Mr. Trump suggested he would use economic force to persuade Canadians to join the United States. Canadian plans are now regularly updated to deal with the surge of migrants, says The Economist, who might want to enter Canada from the United States. Mr. Trump's predilection has compelled Canada to prepare for the event of civil strife next door. Wow. So they're preparing not only a civil defense, but also for an influx of American migrants. Right, now we're going to move on to, before we go back to the US, well, back to the US politically, because there's not too much going on in the world of politics concerning Ukraine, and there's a lot going on with American politics, as you can imagine. I'm going to just talk a little bit about Trump aging, but first, just this incredible story. I don't know if you've seen it. The analyst reported on this: new shoes, Trump, and humiliation. I wonder at times if I'm in an alternate universe. Trump breaks a key meeting with Rubio and Hegseth because he spotted that Hegseth's shoes are at least 2 sizes too big for him and look stupid. He then sees Rubio's, which he thinks are shitty. A few days later, he has bought them new shoes and made them wear them and show them off at a press spray. I just don't know what to say, that they would be so willingly humiliated that it was even an issue that he bought them new shoes. It's got to be the most appalling psychological warfare in the White House. It's pathetic. It's absolutely true. So look at this Daily Mail article. Too big for his boots. Marco Rubio wears new shoes in the White House ordered for him by Donald Trump. The only problem is they don't fit. So he's had to wear shoes that are now too small for him because Donald Trump's made him get 2 pairs of new shoes, or has bought 2 pairs of new shoes for him and Pete Hegseth. And then in press conferences, gets them to talk about the shoes that he's bought for them. Vance 41 even lifted his leg in the air and to show the president the pair he was wearing. Both Vance and Rubio, who apparently, it's Hegseth. It's not Hegseth, it's Vance here, who Trump apparently called kids during the interview, had been gifted 4 pairs of black shoes in a gesture that could be seen as a power move. The vice president revealed last month that his boss stopped a really important meeting to criticize his footwear. Just someone, I mean, I'm not even going to read on, but just like, what is going on with this administration? The guy is just nuts. Anyway, so do we have that? Yes. So then you've got this. I'm sure most of you have seen this, but this is in the middle of the oil execs meeting. This is what Donald Trump does.
Well, I got to look at this myself. Wow. What a view. This is the door to the bar.
What a view. You've just knocked that building. There's nothing there. You've knocked it down and you don't know what to build at the moment because you sacked the architect. So he's just got up in the middle of an oil execs meeting, and Marco Rubio's thinking, Jesus wet, man, this idiot is nuts. Just gets up and starts staring wistfully out the window saying, what a view, in the middle of an oil exec meeting. I mean, and people are kind of chuckling away. I mean, look at some of these people looking on. He's just thinking, is this guy actually nuts? As this source says, this isn't Biden or Obama or Kamala or Antifa or illegals or the deep state or some puppet master. This is Trump abruptly stopping a meeting to gaze at an imaginary ballroom. Look at Rubio and Susie Wiles. They have the quiet shock of resignation. This is our idiot. This is a million times worse than Biden. At least Democrats had the stones to admit and choose someone else, but not MAGA. For them, it's Trump first, America last. They will go down with a Trump-tanic, is their opinion. Now, there was this Wall Street Journal article the other day that was really fascinating. As signs of aging emerge, Trump responds with defiance. In an interview, the president says he has eschewed some advice from his doctors and regrets getting advanced imaging. Of course, we don't know why he's had advanced imaging, but the fact that he's had MRIs means there's something clearly wrong with them. And the fact that, well, we'll come to this in a second, Donald Trump has been taking high doses of aspirin for nearly 25 years, which makes him easily bruised. Now that apparently is the reason why he's getting bruised hands, which means that Caroline Levitt was lying when she said he was getting bruised hands from shaking people's hands. And then it turned out on his left hand, and she still said it. Like, can you admit that you were lying? You were lying so you were lying there. When else are you lying? Now we know that you lie. How do we know when you're not lying? Trump said doctors advised him to reduce his aspirin dosage, but he refused because he had been taking it for many years. You guys don't know what you're talking about. I've been taking it for years. I'm the expert. If I told you how expert I am on everything, everything in the world, concrete, grass, badgers, bits of fluff. I know everything there is to know about all of this stuff. The president also admitted that he briefly wore compression socks because of swollen ankles, but discarded them because he didn't like them. Furthermore, Trump said he regretted undergoing an extensive medical examination in October as it drew unnecessary attention to his health. Why were you required to? Trump also shared that he often ignores doctors' recommendations and is skeptical of conventional medical advice, relying on his good genetics. That's something he's talked about for many decades, actually. If you go back in time, Trump has been big on genetics. However, he and his doctor stated that the president is in excellent shape, and his aides emphasized that Trump maintains a very active work schedule, which is far less active than it was in Trump 1.0. We already know that. So again, people are lying. Trump's physical signs, quote, Trump's physical signs of aging are becoming more evident to some of his closest advisors. His skin is so delicate that Pam Bondi caused his hand to bleed when she nicked him with a ring while giving him a high five at the Republican National Congress in Milwaukee. So the Wall Street Journal on Trump's health and diet, which also includes an interview with him, is insane, says this person. 325 milligrams of aspirin daily, McDonald's burgers and fish fillets and Diet Coke. So when he has a lunch, apparently he has, what is it? It's a Big Mac. Is it a Big Mac, a fillet of fish, and like a double cheeseburger? He has 3 burgers and then fries and then Diet Coke. Like 3 full burgers, refuses to do exercise because it's boring, because of boredom, and rejects medical advice because he's got good genes. And yet Fox News don't appear to say anything about this. And then as soon as Biden stumbled over some words, they had their own aneurysms in the bloody studios. It's just ridiculous. Then, as a result of that Wall Street Journal article, Trump then came out and said, the White House doctors have just reported that I am in perfect health and that I aced, meaning was correct on 100% of the questions asked. Yeah, we know what it means, mate. For the 3rd straight time, my cognitive examination, something which no other president or previous vice president was willing to take. No, they weren't not willing to take them. They didn't have to take them because they weren't losing the plot. You only take a cognitive test if you've got issues with your cognition, right? My dad's taken 2 mocha tests, right, to get mocha scores because he's got dementia. He's taken those tests. Why? Because he's got dementia, and my dad is losing the plot. No offense, Dad, but that is the reality. He didn't take the test because he woke up one day and said, "I'm going to take a cognitive test." I mean, I don't really need to. My brain is firing on all cylinders, but, for shits and giggles, let's take a cognitive test. No one does that, right? So anyway, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the idea that he has taken 3 cognitive tests tells you that something is wrong. No one, you take 1 cognitive test if you've got an issue. You take 3 cognitive tests if things are really, really controversial. So, yeah, absolutely incredible there. Right. I strongly believe that anyone running for president or vice president should be mandatorily forced to take a strong, meaningful, and proven cognitive examination. Our great country cannot be run by stupid or incompetent people. Well, I mean, it is. Just, the idea he's taken 3 tests is evidence that there are issues. Like, otherwise you don't take 3 tests. Right. Just going to move on to what's going on in the US. I'm not going to go through all the details of this, but if you're out there, like, I know I have a few viewers, minus 80 is someone that's been arguing with all of my conclusions about the shooting of Renee Nicole Good, right? She was murdered by ICE. It's done and dusted. All the evidence is there. And then they released his mobile phone footage and the guy that actually shot her. And I think they did that because they thought it would exonerate him, but it actually just confirmed exactly what everyone thought. Now, Dave Trotter from Voting Trend has actually done it's not really his wheelhouse, like he normally talks about polls and voting. He did a really good video. I was going to show you this to you, but I don't really need to. One of the really good sections of his analysis of the new footage and all the footage is that she was doing a 3-point turn effectively. And now we know she was only there for 4 minutes. So the idea that she was blocking them, that they had got stuck in the snow, all of these claims from Kristi Noem and from the American government are now false. We know that they have lied to the American public. She wasn't blocking them. She was waving them past, but she was also only there for 4 minutes. So there hadn't been some kind of massive blocking. She had just dropped her, I think she dropped her wife off, and she had only been there, as I say, for 4 minutes. But also the cars were freely going. No one was digging their cars out. No one was stuck in the snow. And what you see very clearly, and Dave Trotter does a really good job of showing you this, is that she reverses, and you see it from all the angles. So she reverses right hand down, left hand down. So I am here, right? And I want to go in that direction, right? If I reverse, I put my left hand down, which puts my wheel that way, right? So obviously I'm going to be mirrored to you guys, but that will put my wheel that way as I reverse. And then I go right hand down to pull to go out that way. So when I reverse, I'm left hand down. And when I go forward, I'm right hand down. That's exactly what she did. If she had wanted to run over that guy, she would have run over him straight away without changing the wheels. She would have just run into him. She didn't want to do that. And we now hear her. She says she's really nice about it. She says, I don't have a problem with you guys. You can take my registration. No problem with you guys at all. Take my registration because I'm not going to change my number plates like you guys do. And she's speaking really calmly. She's got a window down. She's waving cars past. And then the guy comes around and starts getting his gun out. She's reversing and then goes forward, doesn't hit him. He then shoots her 3 times. So it is just murder. And there is no other explanation of that. And if you still think that she was trying to ram him, then you are delusional. It is simply the case that you are delusional if you think that she was intentionally trying to ram him, because if she intended to ram him, she would never have needed to reverse or to change her wheels at all. She would have just run him over when he moved to the right-hand side of the car and then in front of the car. And then she waited till he's at that corner before trying to get out of dodge. He then shoots diagonally through the window and then twice through the open passenger window and kills her. She is shot 3 times in the face, which is completely unacceptable. So then you've had the US administration absolutely doubling down on defending this guy that shot her, which is, absolutely unconscionable in my considered opinion. And I've done a lot of considering here. So just completely unacceptable. Bear with me a second. My son is trying to speak to me. Anyway, there you go. Trying to explain to my my son that I haven't blocked his internet. It's like, you blocked my internet. No, I haven't. It's not blocked. It's open. So we have then we have videos show ICE agents now going door to door in South Minneapolis, kicking in doors and using force. Reporting says agents relied on an administrative ICE paperwork, not judge-signed warrants, which do not authorize forced entry into private homes. This is what I was talking about the other day. You are going to see an issue with the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment is to the Constitution is that you can't just do unnecessary infringements on individual rights. So you can't go around. That's why you need a warrant to go around and look through people's houses. You need justification for doing that. You can't just turn up and say, well, I'm ICE, I'm going to bust in your door and I'm going to nick you. So that's why people have been safe in their houses from these ICE raids, because of the Fourth Amendment. Well, now they're starting to do this. This is like unconstitutional. And it's really, really worrying. So then you start seeing a pattern emerging here, and it is deeply concerning that you are seeing a change in legal framework and the definitions or the permissions for ICE. So ICE have been given greater and greater immunity. They don't have complete immunity. They have what's it called? Not measured immunity. They've got you guys in the live will give me that. But I can't. It's is it qualified immunity? Anyway, Trump has changed the definition of domestic terrorism to make any opposition to him terrorism. Trump's NSPM7 directive allows federal agencies to investigate you as a domestic terrorist for any anti-Trump and pro-immigrant speech, even if you haven't been accused of a crime. So Trump's NSPM7 labels common beliefs as terrorism indicators. The new directive, and this is coming from September the 27th, 2025. I can't remember if I talked about this back in September. But this is something that I think you're going to see more and more. The Trump administration isn't only targeting organizations or groups, but even individuals and entities whom NSPM7 says can be identified by any of the following indicators, indicia of violence: anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, extremism on race, extremism on gender, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family. So if you like, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on religion, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on morality, you can then get seen as a terrorist. And if you get seen as a terrorist for those things, then you get locked up and you can't protest. You know, they can start locking up protesters that qualify as those things. And then Trump, it's just so dangerous at the moment. It's just this not even a drift. It's a swift plummet towards authoritarianism. Republicans against Trump says a day after Renee Nicole Good was shot and killed by an ICE agent in Minneapolis, Kristi Noem quietly signed a new policy barring congressional visits to ICE facilities. Wow. So now Congress people can't even visit ICE facilities, which is their congressional rights if they are in those districts and in charge of those districts. And now apparently they can't go. I mean, it's ridiculous. Now, I don't know if you guys saw the Kristi Noem. She's the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Her interview with Jake Tapper. It was absolutely glorious on CNN. So I'll try and show. Yeah, here it is. Let's just show you this. If you haven't seen it, it's brilliant, like a deer in the headlights.
I don't actually even know what you're talking about when I ask questions as if like that's an assertion. It's a question. How can you make a conclusion before an investigation? And there really isn't an answer other than you saw the video.
So this is with reference to, she came out after the killing of Good and said, within 30 minutes, she said that I think she mentioned she was a domestic terrorist. And like, how can you tell this woman was a domestic terrorist without doing an investigation? He's absolutely right. This is so divisive. Most proper, decent parliamentarians or lawmakers would come out and say it's too early to make any statements yet. Please bear with us. We're looking into it. We're investigating this, but this is a horrific incident, and we want to make sure that things like this don't happen again. But she came out and said a woman's a domestic terrorist, blah blah blah. And you're like, how can you conclude that having just watched a video on bloody Twitter?
I want to ask a question about the rules of how law enforcement is allowed to engage when feeling threatened, per your assertions. Because I want to show some video to you right now and ask, what is the appropriate response for the police officers in this situation? Those are law enforcement officers being physically attacked. By this standard, would any of those officers be justified in shooting and killing the people causing them physical harm?
Every single situation.
Which is a brilliant question. It's like you are trying to justify a woman sitting in a car who then the guy gets out a gun, she tries to drive away, and she gets shot in the head 3 times, right? And you are justifying that. Here are these guys at January the 6th. Would you justify the police shooting these people? Because you would logically have to. unless you have double standards. In which case, what the hell is the president doing? Letting these guys, pardoning all the 1,600 of these people, and where you are saying that actually they should have been shot in the face multiple times.
Being justified in shooting and killing the people causing them physical harm?
Every single situation is going to rely on the situation those officers are on. That they know that when people are putting hands on them, when they are using weapons against them, when they are physically harming them, that they have the authority to arrest those individuals.
The president
make sure that
pardoned
they're
every single
facing
one of those people.
consequences and make sure that they're getting justice for their actions going forward.
President Trump pardoned every single one of those people.
And every single one of these investigations comes in the full context of the situation on the ground. And that's one thing that President Trump has been so focused on, is making sure that when we're out there, we don't pick and choose which situations are and which laws are enforced and which ones aren't. Every single one of them is being enforced under the Trump administration. And the clarity of the law stands. And if people don't like it, these members of Congress and elected officials should go change the law and make sure they have that debate and policy.
The law is there. It's just not being uniformly applied. Like you're saying that these guys can shoot that woman in the face, but people at January 6th can't shoot the protesters because they're pro-Trump, right? It's outrageous.
Just showed you video of people attacking law enforcement officers. Undisputed proof, undisputed evidence. And I just said President Trump pardoned all of them. And you said that President Trump is enforcing all the laws equally. It's just not true. There's a different standard for law enforcement officials being attacked if they're being attacked by Trump supporters. We just saw that.
And she then gives him the same answer, just like deer in headlights. But then he moves on or ends the interview. Whereas if I was a producer there, the director, I would be like, Jake, don't give up on this. Like, she needs to be absolutely hammered on this. Do a Mehdi Hassan on her. Do not let her go. And drill down to the core idea that she has complete double standards and she doesn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to her claims with regard to Renee Nicole Good. Just, I mean, that was great from Jake Tapper. We need to see more of that. And she, you know, she's getting a lot of stick for the fact that she said nothing effectively that made any sense. And she definitely didn't answer the issues that he brought up there. But she should have been absolutely roasted by Jake Tapper. He did a good job, but it should. I always think everyone should just go and watch Mehdi Hassan interview. Watch Mehdi Hassan interview. Everyone should be a Mehdi Hassan when they interview. And you should be a dog with a bone, and you do not let it go. Don't move on to you, because I've said this to you a million times, but people, I think when they interview, they go into an interview and they say, right, I've got 10 questions down here that I'm going to ask this person. And they think, right, I have to get through all these 10 questions because I've written them down. I have to ask them. Whereas I would have, okay, I've got 10 questions here, but if we don't bottom out question one, I couldn't give a crap about questions 2 to 10. It's going to be the entire time on question one, and I will nail you, man. You will have to justify yourself really bloody well. But people move on, right? Okay, we're not getting anywhere. Let's move on to the next question. No, we're not getting anywhere, and therefore we will stay here until it is obvious, because you've been speaking for 5 minutes, that you do not have a clue about this topic or this thing, or you're completely unable to answer it. And we'll spend 5 minutes with you flailing. That's what should happen. Anyway, that's just my pet peeve there. Right, then moving on to this. Germany 1933, police were given immunity for random violence, including killings of minorities and political opponents. Many were promoted. They had a license from the top. For the first time in Europe, the police were the violent criminals. It's Germany 1933, and that is pretty much what's going on at the moment, especially since these guys have been given that form of immunity, which I don't know if any of you answered. I'm sure is it qualified immunity, something like that. Anyway, yes, so there we go. It is all looking rather dodgy. So here we have, yeah, so that's the situation. And again, you know, I just go back to, she's reversing left hand down, reversing left hand down. This is exactly what I was saying. And then right hand down to pull away. was not trying to ram him. No, absolutely wasn't trying to ram him. The federal agent who reviews these cases for DHS was interviewed by CBS and puts blame on the officer. So CBS News, which is now run by Barry Weiss and owned by Paramount Skydance and now under control of the Trump administration, effectively. And I've talked to you about 4 or 5 incidences that show this to be true. 2 segments being pulled from 60 Minutes, 3 segments from one of their main news anchors now showing fealty to Trump. And then we have this federal agent who reviews these cases for DHS was interviewed by CBS, put the blame on the officer. CBS then cut the interview from their news coverage, but it still ended up on YouTube and it's damning. So he's the expert that goes through it, but CBS cut that from their news because like CBS is now compromised. Just understand that it is now a compromised news channel. Right. Anyway, moving on to our favorite wingnut, which is Elon Musk. So we have, this is who Elon Musk is retweeting, a literal Nazi. I don't know if any of you are on Twitter. Elon Musk has gone batshit crazy again. He has gone back to tweeting like 5 million times a day. And all of it is like extreme fascistic stuff, like racist, Nazi. Honestly, he's terrible, Elon Musk, at the moment. He's worse than he's ever been. He's now, so here's just one example. He's retweeting a literal Nazi who received 1,500 euros from Brenton Tarrant, who murdered 51 people in Christchurch. So he's the guy that killed people in Christchurch, New Zealand, in that big shooting. Martin Sellner has been banned from entering several countries, including the US, but he gets retweeted by Elon Musk. No future government should give Elon Musk $1. But anyway, that's the sort of thing he's doing. And one thing he said, well, here's an example. He does, if he's not saying it directly himself, he's saying true or wow or whatever to these things that other people are saying. So he retweets someone who says, if white men become a minority, we will be slaughtered. Remember, if non-whites openly hate white men while white men hold a collective majority, then they will be 1,000 times more hostile and cruel when they are a majority over whites. White solidarity is the only way to survive. So the idea is that we have to have literally white supremacy in order that these non-white people, because they're so violent, they hate us so much, they don't kill us all. Which is basically KKK ideology, and that is what Musk is now endorsing. But every day, loads of times, and it's really despicable. Another thing, though, that Musk admitted, and when he says things like "wow," "true," this or that, like it's an insight into what he believes. Someone the other day said, just a reminder that 5 years ago today, Twitter banned Donald Trump. If not for Elon Musk buying Twitter and turning it into X, who knows if Trump would have even won the election. Elon gave Trump back his speech even before he was re-elected. Musk says true, which one would think is true to all of that, which is if it wasn't for Musk, Trump wouldn't have won the election. So this person says Elon Musk is now acknowledging that through his purchase of Twitter or X, he basically bought the election for Trump, which is really a staggering degree of corruption right out in the open. I really believe that is true as well. I think Musk was one of the main reasons, a really significant reason Trump was able to get elected. Now, Musk came out and he's attacking the UK. He's attacking the UK over tech regulation. And the other day he said, because he keeps saying that we get, in the UK, 12,000 people have been arrested for saying things on Twitter. It's like, no, it's to do with like actually committing crimes that you can do through social media or whatever. But it's not, it's like, oh God, let's unpick this. So anyway, all this like nonsense. And Elon Musk is like, the UK is a police state. And then Larry the Cat, who's great on Twitter, says people fatally shot by UK police in 2024 to 2025. Two people shot by the police in 2024 to 2025. In 2025 alone, people fatally shot by US law enforcement in that year, 1,280. Don't come and tell us that we live in a police state here. I never see the police. I just hardly ever see the police. I know I live mainly in this room, but like when I'm driving, it's just, and that's a complaint, as is not enough police. French history, a particular channel here talks to that as well. How many citizens were killed by police in each country between 2010 and 2019? Canada, 305. France, 233. Germany, 100. Australia, 53. The UK, 22. United States, 15,008. So don't come around here. Don't come onto my Twitter feed and tell me that I live in a police state. And in fact, so you've had Trump and Musk slag off London recently, saying how horrific London is and how Sadiq Khan is the worst mayor and blah, blah, blah. London murder rate falls to its lowest rate on record. Just thought I'd throw some, maybe a little bit of fact out there for you all. The number of murders recorded in London has dropped to its lowest level per capita since records began. There were 97 homicides in the capital in 2025, down 36% from 153 in 2019. 2025 saw a homicide rate of 1.1 per 100,000 people. That's safer than comparable global cities such as New York at 2.8, Paris at 1.6, Toronto at 1.6, Berlin at 3.2, Los Angeles at 5.6, Chicago at 11.7, and Philadelphia at 12.3. So London's all right, thank you very much. Now, we've got a problem with shoplifting and petty crime. That is true. But when it comes to things like homicides, you know, not so much a problem. Right. One of the last things I'm going to talk to you about today is going to be the Fed chair, Powell. And this is really super important because this is a sign of overreach. We talked about American international political overreach into, say, Germany earlier from the HHS Secretary Kennedy. But we also have domestic overreach. Now, Trump, the Fed, the federal bank is an independent entity in the American political system, but Trump keeps wanting the rates to be lowered by the Fed, and the Fed chair, whom was selected by Trump in 2017. So this is Trump's guy originally. He is not reducing the rates at the levels that Trump wants, and this is causing Trump to hate Jerome Powell. And now we understand that Jeanine Pirro, who used to be on Fox News, is now the AG for Washington, is she? Has now subpoenaed him, and there's this investigation into him. In a highly unusual move, Jerome Powell disclosed that the U.S. Department of Justice served the agency with subpoenas and threatened a criminal indictment over testimony he gave to a Senate committee about renovations to Federal Reserve buildings. So one of the things they're trying to do him for is the fact that the reserve building that they're building, this new Fed building, is apparently like costing too much, and there was a nice dining room suite or something like that. They've actually pulled back from doing that, and they've actually changed that, by the way. But anyway, it's amazing. Donald Trump's knocked down the East Wing, right? And it's spiraling to $400 million, and he's looking at now knocking down some of the West Wing, and yet it's the Fed chair Jerome Powell that gets subpoenaed for stuff like that. It's absolutely incredible. But what's interesting about this is Jerome Powell has now come out and said his piece, but he hasn't taken the claims one by one that he's being done for. He's saying, I'm not being done. He's fighting fire with fire. He's saying, this is a political assassination. I'm being done politically. So listen to Jerome Powell here, and I'll tell you why this is important.
Good evening. On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned in part a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people.
Right. So this is really important because he says, screw you, Trump. This is not to do with or Janine Pirro. This is not to do with any of the reasons you're giving. This is a political hit job. And you just don't like the fact that I won't reduce the interest rates. And this is very, very significant. It's more important than you think. But first of all, I'm going to go to Pod Save America to just give a bit of analysis of what's going on there.
Maybe he leaves early because 28 is after the midterm. You know, it's a while
Yeah,
away. There's a lot of angles.
I think
for
Donald
him.
Trump has miscalculated. I think this is I think this is going to blow up in his face and already is. There's also
and part of why it will blow up in his face is because you've got at least a number of Republicans who will not vote. So if he gets like subpoenaed and done and blah, 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 what Trump wants is a new person to be put through, to be nominated for the Fed chair to replace him. But you've got Tom Tillis, who's a Republican that at the moment is really critical of Trump as a senator, who is saying, so the whole Venezuela thing and the whole Greenland thing's really pissed him off. So he is on the banking committee and he said he will not vote for a new Fed chair until this is all sorted out. Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, likewise. So already, like, it's not looking like he would be able to replace Jerome Powell. So you've already got a rebellion, a senatorial rebellion, or from the Republican point of view, stopping this from being what Trump wants it to be. And so it's already, as they say, blowing up in his face.
Also, we should talk about there's some back and forth about how this happened and whether Trump was involved. So Axios has an administration official saying Janine Pirro, quote, went rogue.
Come on.
Another said that,
Come on.
Another said Trump heard about the investigation after the fact, but that Pirro wouldn't have gone forward without a signal that he'd be supportive. That sounds more like Trump. Politico, they have a different story. They have a bunch of administration sources blaming Bill Pulte, the mortgage fraud czar, who reportedly recently pitched Trump on firing Powell and actually brought wanted posters of the Fed chair to his meeting with Trump. And apparently it was just at Mar-a-Lago recently that he met with Trump. And then Pulte was asked about this today, and he was like, I have no idea. I have nothing to do with this. It's DOJ. And so they're all basically going back and forth, blaming each other and trying to keep Trump out of it, which, here's the thing, they're all liars all the time. But I think it goes to show that it doesn't seem like many people in the administration are all that happy about this.
So whether it was Janine Pirro just taking the hint from Trump, and by the way, from Trump allies in Congress who have referred Powell to DOJ for an investigation over this, or they had a conversation, who fucking knows? There's a simple way to prove that Donald Trump doesn't think is a good idea. Fire Janine Pirro for doing what is obviously a misuse of her job. This is ridiculous. Can't politicize the Fed. She's fired. We'll put in somebody better. Of course, that's not what's going to happen. So whatever the actual path to this, like, Donald Trump wants this, they're doing Donald Trump's bidding.
Yeah, the only reason it's worthwhile is because they don't see this as I don't think they see this as a political winner right now. And this is partly why Republicans Tom Tillis and Lisa Murkowski have already said they will not vote for any of Trump's Fed nominees until this gets resolved. Tillis also said it's now the credibility and independence of the Justice Department, not the Fed, that's in question. Murkowski even said that the Justice Department should be investigated by Congress.
That's mad. So you've got two Republican senators coming out saying actually the DOJ needs to be investigated, not the Fed chair. So this is causing quite a ruckus.
Doesn't take both of them to kill a nomination at this point, because Tillis is on the banking committee and the split is 13-11. And so if he's a no, 12-12 does not get the nominee out of committee. So Tillis can single-handedly block a Trump nominee for new Fed chair. So already Trump has this is blowing up in his face. Other Republicans in the House and Senate have also spoken out about the investigation, spoken out against the investigation, and Axios reported that a source familiar with Scott Bessent's call to Donald Trump about the issue said that the Treasury Secretary let the president know he isn't happy and that the investigation, quote, made a mess that could be bad for financial markets.
Yeah, Scott Bessent is taking a lot of calls from the CEOs of various banks today, and So
this is where it starts getting on to why this is important. So why is it important why am I talking about this? And actually, you are now getting to a point where international banks, so global central banks, have offered their full solidarity to US federal Fed's Powell amid Trump threats. So you've got central banks from around the world have phoned up Powell and offered full, we're with you. Like, this is way more important than you think. So as soon as a president gets involved with a central bank in this way, I think Nixon tried to do it in the 70s, it ends up is very bad. So as a result, the dollar is weakened after US prosecutors have launched a criminal investigation in the Federal Reserve. So that affects the economy big time. That affects exports and imports. And then you've got this, Justin Wolfers talks to this point. What can history teach us about what happens when a populist strongman with an idiosyncratic taste for low interest rates undermines central bank independence? A brief history of inflation in Turkey, or what happens when a populist strongman with blah, 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 blah. So Erdogan signals that he plans to take control of monetary policy. The inflation rate goes up, and then Erdogan installs a loyalist at the central bank as governor. Inflation rate skews really high. And actually, that's the same around the world. That is a repeated, I believe, a repeated phenomenon. So you basically, if Trump gets involved with the central bank, with the Fed, then inflation goes nuts, and then that causes a problem globally to do with economics, but actually causes a massive issue for Trump himself in terms of being re-elected in the midterms. Honestly, this is a much, much bigger problem than you might think. I'm going to go back to just a little bit of analysis from these guys again.
He is trying to distance himself from this.
Also, and added bonus, maybe it's an opportunity to shiv Bill Pulte, if you remember.
His enemy from the podcast birthday party.
I think he shivved them once before with his elbow.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So
what a fighter, that guy.
I don't know. You guys think the mini rebellion here will have staying power, or what?
I mean, Thom Tillis, a lot of H's in that name. His term ends January 3rd, 2027, so we can make trouble for a while. But Murkowski won re-election in 2022, so she's not, and presumably will run again in 28. So if she really sticks to this and like they decide to use their power, it could create real problems for Trump in terms of filling a vacancy here. Like, just quickly on this, did Trump know about this thing? I don't believe for a second he didn't know. Like, think of the number of times you've heard him get asked a question about something major and controversial, and he's like, I don't know anything about that, right? Like the pardoning of Juan Orlando Hernandez, he's been asked about it 3 or 4 times now, the fucking narco criminal former president of Honduras that he pardoned. He still acts like he didn't know. There's never a follow-up from the reporter that's like, shouldn't you know who you're pardoning? But whatever. So I think he likes to float things, and then he'll blame, Jeanine Pirro, whoever else, if it goes poorly.
But also, if he met with Bill Pulte recently at Mar-a-Lago, and Bill Pulte brought with him a fucking wanted poster of Jerome Powell,
hopefully it's a photo.
The two of them could have had a nice conversation at Mar-a-Lago where that was it. That was the conversation, and maybe he didn't run it through the chain of the administration officials. Right. But I don't know. It does seem like this is going to have staying power. Also, again, if Powell decides to stay on now, then Trump's going to have to name a new Fed chair from the current board of governors, because there's not going to be I guess there'll be one vacancy. He won't get 2 vacancies. Right now he could get 2 vacancies next year, but if Powell stays, that's one less vacancy that he can fill. And the Fed chair nomination is now going to be that person's going to have to really prove their independence from Donald Trump, because Thom Tillis and Lisa Murkowski and now a bunch of other Senate Republicans are pretty worried about this.
Yeah, and he's talked about appointing one of his various sort of local goons into that role, right? Does he still want to do that? We're going to go through the song and dance of some Trump advisor pretending that they're going to be independent. We talked about this earlier today.
So the question is, what do the Democrats do about this? And what's their action?
Should make out of this? It does fit with the affordability message.
Yeah, I mean, it's objectively a huge deal. I don't know that voters necessarily know much about the Fed or its independence. I think to the extent we talk about it, it's like this is about Trump trying to help out special interests. Like, this is Trump wanting a rate cut for Wall Street and his real estate buddies, who want rates to come down so they get richer, even if you have to deal with more inflation forever, right? Like, that is the mission of the Fed. So, like, I wouldn't get bogged down with the renovation stuff, obviously, except to be like, well, this guy's ripping down the East Wing or whatever, taking bribes from billionaire buddies to build a ballroom. But I do think, like, the reason this has some staying power is Republicans are getting calls from rich donors on Wall Street. And I do think the market's not reacting because of the same taco phenomenon, right? They probably think he's going to cave just like he did with China. Or maybe they quietly, don't hate the idea of going back to zero interest rates because that makes the market rip.
Especially a lot of the tech goons.
Yeah, I mean, you're starting.
So the point is, if you get someone into the Fed who is what Trump wants, who will lower interest rates for all the reasons Trump wants them to lower interest rates, that will be hugely inflationary, as well as just in general. That's kind of what happens when you get this involvement from the government, and that will not go down well with businesses and economists.
Starting to see these interesting.
They love a low interest rate.
It's the best thing for them. You're starting to see some articles from Wall Street analysts about how like the jobless boom, because companies are doing well, they're like kind of pocketing efficiency from layoffs after COVID, and this is why I'm going to leave you before I do the super chats. But this last point is super important, so hear this out. From AI. And so they're making more money, but there aren't any jobs. So it's sort of bad politically, but it's helping Wall Street.
I think an easy way too is, and Jason Furman mentioned this in one of his tweets about this, which is like, there's a list of countries where the independence of the Fed was demolished by a leader of the country who just wanted to use it for their own political purposes, and didn't go well for any of their economies.
Lael and I talked about this specifically.
Yeah, Donald Trump is threatening something that could cause double-digit inflation. Some of the worst inflation countries have experienced around the world has happened after they've politicized their central banks. And I think the kind of people that would say that they might like low interest rates, but threatening the independence of the central bank is incredibly dangerous, are the kind of validators that reach out beyond like normal political validators. They're the kind of people that are like on CNBC, that are in like economics and like financial advice podcasts that will talk about how dangerous and stupid this is. And I do think that will matter. I do think that reaches people, that Donald Trump is like a chaos agent and this is dangerous.
Okay, so just honestly, just bear this in mind that this could be an absolute landmine for the American economy if he gets involved with the federal bank, then gets it under his own domain and control, and then you'll get huge inflation, and that will just be an absolute catastrophe. It really is a problem. So this is the last. And this kind of plays into exactly what it wasn't John Favreau, as Tommy Vito was just saying, that you've got this jobless boom, which is that there's a boom going on. Like big companies are making shed loads of money, but they're making lots of money because they've recognized efficiencies from laying people off during COVID, and then they've realized those efficiencies and not rehired those people because actually we've learned how to cope without them. And then AI has come along, and AI means we need even fewer people. So actually there aren't jobs being created, which is exactly what I did you that video the other day on the jobs market numbers. They are terrible for the US, and this fits into exactly that. And yet there are companies that are still making bunches of money. What's going on there? And that's the jobless boom. So here we have a sorry, just had to come in and come out due to large baby noises. So we have here US workers just receiving 53.8% of GDP in the third quarter, the lowest share since the government started tracking this in 1947. That's down from 54.6% the quarter before, and well below 55.6% average for the 2020s. In other words, as a percentage of GDP, US workers received like a proportion of GDP, and that is going down. And that is kind of a sign that the workers aren't making the money and the people up here are making the money. So at the same time, corporate profit margins are hitting some of their strongest levels in decades. To put this simply, GDP measures the total value of everything that the economy produces, and labor share of that tells you how much of it goes to the workers as wages, salaries, bonuses, and benefits versus how much goes to company profits and shareholders. So the S&P 500 is doing really well, thank you very much. but actually the people on the ground aren't doing very well. They either don't have the jobs because they're not being hired, they're being laid off, the jobs numbers are looking terrible, manufacturing, blue collar jobs are going. And yet these companies are still making loads of money. So how does that work? How is the economy both looking really good, but also like in a job sense, looking very bad? So labor share tells you how much of it goes to workers in those ways. When labor share drops, it means the economy can grow while workers see less of the gain. So you get this again, a polarization of the rich and the poor, really. Your big people who hold all the capital up here, they are, this is, I'm sure, so you would have I was going to start going off on one there. No, but essentially you are going to see this inequality, I think, divide grow, this gap between the rich and poor grow. My take, says this person, this is a chart that explains why so many people feel like the economy isn't working for them. Even when the GDP numbers look fine, the pie is getting bigger, but workers are getting a smaller slice. That 53.8% is a record low going back nearly 80 years. A productivity story makes this even more interesting. Productivity jumped at the fastest pace in 2 years, which sounds great until you realize companies are using those gains to operate with fewer workers rather than pay existing workers more. Richmond Fed President Barkin basically said as much. Businesses are relying on productivity gains to run leaner. Add AI into the mix and you have a recipe for GDP growth that doesn't translate into hiring or wage gains. This is why I keep saying the headline economic numbers don't capture what regular people are experiencing. The economy can look healthy on paper while the people who power it fall further behind. Now, that could be what happened with Biden at the end of the Biden administration, where you look at all these headline numbers and, hey, the economy's looking great. Actually, people weren't feeling it. And that was a criticism for Biden. But the thing is that Trump said he would come and save that. He would speak into those people, but he's come along and he's exacerbating the problem. So the tariffs are making it worse. Like manufacturing is going down. Steel prices are going up to $5,000 a hujima flip. It is everything that Trump is doing is making the problem worse. And that was the main reason that Trump got elected in the first place. Yes, immigration and border control, but yes, inflation in the economy. And at the moment, he is not doing the right thing. And then you've got AI not helping, and he wants to then reduce interest rates, which then shove inflation up. So he wants to take over the Fed, reducing interest rates. That would be inflationary, and tariffs are already inflationary. And what you're just going to have is a recipe for people to not have as much money in their pockets by November as they do now, and certainly as they did a year ago. The point being is, if I was a GOP strategist, if I was a Trump strategist, I'd say you're doing everything exactly wrong if you want to get voted in November. Like, everything you're doing is great for you to consolidate power. If you want to be authoritarian and dictator, now the question is, well, maybe he doesn't give a damn about the November midterms because he's trying to stop people having access to voting machines, mail-in ballots. He's trying to stop them. And so he might realize that and say, I don't give a damn anyway, because I don't plan on having elections in November. I mean, that's one interpretation of the data, but essentially, like, the economic data is not looking good for Trump, and he's doing everything wrong to deal with that. Anyway, that's my video for you. It's been a long one. Sorry. Let's just get into some of your comments as quickly as I can, because I've got a family and whatnot. It's been a bit crazy. Lemon Curds One Sandwich says, someone needs to ask Trump how he would feel if a larger military force invaded the southern border and wanted Texas and took the entire border, and you're told to give up the land for peace. I've often said that, but the thing is, because that'll never happen, like, he's not worried about that. But ostensibly, if Russia took Alaska, how would you feel about it? When he tells Ukraine that they have to give land to Russia, how would you like to give Alaska to Russia? So on and so forth. But yeah, salient point. Julian Rossler, good to have you on board, mate. I wonder if there's a link between the recent US imperialism and the 250th anniversary of the country. Seems the administration wants to add territory as a birthday present, and I guess his legacy as well. I honestly don't underestimate the importance of getting older and feeling mortality a bit more. Mortality salience, as it's called, is a very important thing. I've written about mortality salience in books and articles previously with regard to religion. So religiosity is really interesting when you look at whether people's sense of mortality has an effect on their predisposition for becoming more religious, because you're thinking, oh, I'm suddenly more, I feel I'm going to die soon, or I better start believing in something that prolongs my life through life after death. And you get something called terror management theory. Terror management theory is how do you manage your terror with regard to existential issues like that. Anyway, you know, this is the strength of ideas of heaven and hell and stuff like that. Anyway, I won't bore you with that, but I think, you know, mortality salience is a serious psychological, has a serious psychological impact on people. So don't underestimate how Trump might be feeling, especially he's having MRIs and he's having cognitive exams, and no matter what he's telling you and how well he's acing everything, he's going to know in his head that that he's not long for this earth. Like, you know, you're over 80, you're getting on, you're over your average life expectancy, and you know, you want to leave a legacy. You also might just be making decisions that are a bit bonkers anyway because you're older and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's probably a mix of all of the above, right? Right, Kevin Forst, thank you very much. 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships, thank you, I really appreciate that. So let's see. Vego Holmson says there's a rumor Russia has placed a band of debris in low orbit to damage Starlink satellites, or at least is planning to do so. That was not a rumor, but it was believed that that is one of their options. I don't know if they did it, but it was something that was being talked about a couple of weeks ago, relatively recently. So you're right about that. It was. I don't know if I might have mentioned it in one of my videos. Actually, I think I did. I talk about so much I forget what I've talked about. Please hit like, subscribe, and it's free. Share on Blue Sky as well, and thank you for hanging out at Blue Sky as well, rather than the hellhole that is Twitter. Goldfingers says it's possible to block Starlink dishes with electronic warfare since they work on microwave frequency. There you go, and they've obviously worked out that indeed. Stefan Heinzman says, good to have you back on board, Stefan. Been a long time. One thing is clear in Iran, the scale of casualties dwarfs all other protests by a wide margin. Not even the 79 revolution, 79 was that bloody, including the following executions. That is significant, and that could be a problem for the protesters. I really do think, you know, we might be being a party to, or not being party to. So I was going to say witnessing, but we're not witnessing it. I mean, that's the point. This could be really, really freaking brutal in Iran, and I guess that's your only option. If you are an authoritarian regime and you're protesting to that degree, you've got to meet the protest with the proportional viciousness. You know, if you're not going to step down and say, right, yeah, you guys, you got a good point, let's have democracy. If you're not going to do that, then you've got to contain that, and it just means that you're going to have to be even more violent, and that is a real shame. David L, thank you, Jonathan, for your daily hourly reporting on geopolitics. Sometimes it is hourly, and sometimes I wish I could do more videos than I do, because I've got so much to talk about. But I did manage to fit quite a lot into this one today. So thank you for being a part of that. And thank you for your support, David. Bubba Zula, great reporting today. Thank you, JP. Thank you. My brain has been all over the place. I've got all sorts of different things going on. And I think my little MS brain is struggling. So David L says the United States does not even operate icebreaker ships as Russia does. This is correct. Do you think there may be collusion between Trump, maggots, and Putler to invade Greenland? Randy Fine is a dick. This is true. The last part is definitely true. I don't know that there is collusion, but I think that Russia say things that know they can manipulate the US. And there is a theory that actually they ended up getting a letter. Danish intelligence says that they got a letter in 2019 to Trump. It was effectively a fake letter that ended up going to a senator who took it to Trump, who gave Trump the idea to take control of Greenland in Trump 1.0, right? And so the Russians will be behind this. I don't think it's collusion. I think it's more likely to be manipulation. And Trump is so easy to manipulate. Trump is 21st century Don Quixote tilting at windmills. This is definitely true. And thank you for having that NAFO patch still in your avatar. It's awesome. Rock Butcher says, my daughter just looked at the screen and said that looks like The Last Supper. I told her that it may well be. Up there, no, that is Bar at the Folie Bergère by Georges Manet. It is one of my favorite French Impressionist paintings. And I love it. It's got loads of interesting things about reflection. It's quite an interesting social window into France at the time, but also like the expression on her face. She's so morose, so pensive, like what is going on there. And you can see Manet in a picture on the right, because that's a mirror behind her. So everything is actually behind you as the viewer of that painting. And you've got like Bass over here. Oh, you can't see my cursor. But over on the right, you've got like a Bass, bottle of Bass, which is a British ale that you can still buy. It's got the trademark on it. So one of the earliest trademarks. So loads in that picture. Yeah, bar at the FUNDRAISER. But if you want to know about Last Supper, you can read one of my books. So this book is The Resurrection, a critical examination of the Easter story. So that's a exegetical, historical look at whether the Easter story in the Bible is true or not, and I do some historical and theological analysis of that. And it is quite an academic book, but it's also an easy read, hopefully, and it's interesting, if I don't mind me saying so. So there you go. Finnish guy. I really hope that this condition is progressing so fast that he doesn't have time to start World War III. Yeah. Oh, sorry about your dad, JP. Dementia is horrible. I've worked in care for years, and it's awful. Yeah. And I'm starting to wonder whether my mum is losing her memory as well. We're quite worried at the moment, so that could be two for the price of one, and that is a concern. At this point, he could start mumbling fake words and take a dump on stage on live TV, and people will still try to justify it. It doesn't seem to matter how far gone he is. I totally agree with that. It is so depressing. Who's popping? In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Yes, I love that statement. Please like, subscribe. Let's get to 100,000 subscribers. Thanks to Pirate, and thanks for your super chat. Really appreciate that. Just the last few super chats here. David L, just because. Thank you, David L. You've been super generous today. I really appreciate that. As has Who's Popping and the Pirate. Check out UKIP's new logo. I've not seen that, Slava Ukraini. Thanks, Who's Popping, for the heads up there. Stephen Bendel, sorry I sent the rest of my money to Azov. Good on you, mate, and that's better spent. So, and Stephen's flat in apartment in Kiev has been under the cosh recently as bombs or drones and missiles have hit Western Kiev. So I hope your apartment's okay, mate. Right, just a few more here. Johnny Nedregard, thank you for your super chat. Really appreciate that. Here's my Pete candle. Girl Pete. And Richard Bennett gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics membership. So thank you. Oh my goodness, I don't know if this is true, but some King Raccoon saying no knowledge of the provenance of these numbers. So pinch of salt. So this is just King Raccoon saying this online, but obviously there's a rumor that more than 23,000 Iranians have been killed, and that would be absolutely insane. Michael Lanning, has anyone ever heard a right-wing person admit that they are racist? I've not actually. Okay, yeah, there were a few recently that said it. There's that brazenness now that seems to have come to the fore. We need to boycott X for a day. Yes. In Norway, says Viggo Holmson, people owning Teslas have started buying stickers with "This car was bought before Musk came out of the Nazi closet." Yeah, that's quite a common thing. You know, I bought this before I knew not the Musk was a twat or whatever. To quote Bill Hicks, good old Bill Hicks, England, where no one has guns, 14 deaths. United States, 23,000 deaths from handguns, but there's no connection. Of course, there's not. Yeah, well said. Babazula, I hope all my fellow Americans have their go bags packed. And there you go. Look, that's enough from me. I really do appreciate all of your tremendous support for the channel. Thank you. It keeps the lights on, and it does allow me to do this, and it allows my partner to justify leaving me alone to do this, although I do need to get back to the family. I've had people going, I can't get on my internet. You need to get that. My boys apparently can't get on the internet. Well, deal with it. I had that for what is it, 35 years of my life or whatever. No, when's the internet? The internet was invented. I had emails 1996. I got my email. Nice. So however old I was then, I was a lot younger than I thought. Anyway, deal with it, boys. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to the mods. I hope this was of interest. I hope I gave you stuff that made you think about different areas of geopolitics, but it all links together. Like, how does the economy link to Trump and Trump's getting voted back in, but also his position on Ukraine, and does that distract away from Ukraine, and how does Iran fit into the mix, and how does the ICE situation fit in, and so on and so forth. We live in, as Ginger Tom says, interesting times, worrying times, but let's stick together. Thanks for hanging out here, and thanks for being so wonderful in the live chat. You guys are amazing. Big love. I'll speak to you soon. I need a cup of tea. I need a cup of tea. So I'm going to get a cup of tea. And none of you are going to stop me. You won't stop me. I'm not going to do a long goodbye. It's going to be a short goodbye. In fact, I'll tell you what, there's one more thing I was going to say.